is the first time I've seen this picture. This is the man who fathered my children. You meet a guy, you fall in love with him, you know, he could tell you the sky is pink and you go, yeah, it is, and you know it's blue. But you go along with it because you're in love with this guy and you feel like he wouldn't do anything to put you in any harm's way. Whatever I did feel for this man, it doesn't exist anymore. That died a long time ago. The whole time I was looking at him, I was just thinking, can I reach him? Can I get to him before they get to me? How much damage can I do if I do get to him? Will it be enough to end his life? 2 seconds, that's all I need is 2 seconds. And I'm willing to go to jail for that because I have nothing to live for. I hope you rot in hell. When we first met and became involved with each other, he was a little bit older than me. I met him in school. He was very gentle, very, very, very kind, and very attentive.
I like your smile.
He just was so, I guess the word is smooth. I felt the way that he treated me was something that I hadn't experienced with anybody else. Everything just fell into place.
I've been having such a good time with you. I have something to tell you.
I got pregnant, and when I found out he was excited about it, you know,
Yes!
that was his baby, and what he wanted to do was to marry me, so that's what we did. The day that I got married, it was November 21st, 1964. It was surreal. I was happy. I was finally Mrs. Reginald Brooks. And I just figured we'd be together for the rest of our lives, like you're supposed to, till death us do part. And I believe that. We had our second child, and we were still getting along really, really well. At least in my mind, I thought we were. The only thing that I, had a little bit of concern with was why are you always trying to keep people away from me? My favorite uncle was visiting our family. He was at my parents' home.
Hello?
And my mother called to tell me that he was here and wanted to see me. And I was excited about that.
Oh, yeah? How long is he here for?
They're gonna come over here and visit for a little bit. I made all these arrangements.
Maybe you guys could stop by today. We're not up to much anyway. Yeah? I'd love that. Well, I'll see you soon then.
Who's that?
And then when I told Reggie about it, and he's like, well, they're not coming in here.
I don't want them here right now.
I'm like, what do you mean they're not coming in here? When they get here, just don't answer the door. And I said, why not? He said, because I don't want anybody in here. And I'm like, okay. He didn't say it mean. He didn't say it, demanding or anything. It was just a normal conversation.
I really don't feel like entertaining anybody right now.
I didn't know where that was coming from. Maybe he just didn't feel like, having no company here. I had no way to warn my mother because there were no cell phones back then. So I couldn't call and divert them.
Reggie, can I get the door?
They came and they knocked and they knocked and they knocked, and I wasn't allowed to open the door and let them in.
Reggie,
Don't. Please.
please.
It felt like an eternity to me. that my mother and my uncle were standing on the porch knocking on the door to get in, knowing that I should be there.
Reggie, I need to answer the door. This is very strange.
And I wasn't opening the door. I was just standing there and just hoping that, eventually that they would stop knocking and just go home. I was very young and very naive to a lot of things. I was a little too embarrassed to even go over there, even later on, and, even try to explain anything, because I was just like, wow, what do I say? That was just that one time, and after that, if anybody were to come around or come to visit, whatever, I just go to her house. It just made it easier. If he didn't want to go, that's fine, but we're going. You don't want to participate in anything, that's fine, we're going. So it never happened again. He was a loner, and I kind of respected that, but then he started not wanting to do too much. He stopped going out of the house.
Now you can't catch me.
He wouldn't go anywhere. He wouldn't go to the store with me. He wouldn't go to anybody's home with me. If we were invited anywhere, he didn't want to go.
Reg, you want to come into town with us? We're going to go to the movies.
So hang out here for a little bit.
He didn't want to be around his family. He didn't want to be around my family. He would sit on the porch and he would watch the kids play. And then eventually he stopped even sitting on the porch and he just stayed in the house. I didn't perceive that as being strange. He just was a recluse. He just got to the point that he didn't want to associate, or he disassociated himself from the outside world. That's how I perceived it. It's like, okay, if this is how you want to live, or this is how you want to be, that's on you, but we're not going to stay locked up in this house. We're going to do what we do on a daily basis. If you're content to sit in here, then that's what you do. He felt somebody out there was out to get him or trying to poison him. I had made this beef stew. Me not eating with them was not unusual, because if I'm making sure everybody is fed, I'm doing stuff. But he wasn't feeling all that great, and he was sick.
Beverly?
Yeah, babe?
And then he comes in there like I've done something.
What are you trying to do? You better tell me what's in this, okay? And don't you play stupid.
And accuse me of putting stuff in his food.
What are you talking about?
He said, what'd you put in the food? And I said, seasoning, what I always do.
Are you okay?
I don't know why you would think I would do something like that. Where would I even get poison?
Stop denying it. That's why you haven't eaten any of the stew.
Come on, the kids ate it too. Do you really think I would poison my own children?
Prove it.
What?
I said prove it.
He is like, well, I need you to eat it.
Eat a bowl right now.
Fine.
I'm like, okay, I don't have a problem eating it. So I did, and he stood there while I ate it. And I ate it.
See? Nothing wrong with me.
I don't know why you're feeling this way. I don't know why you're sick. Has nothing to do with your food.
Reggie, you really don't look so well.
He still wasn't feeling any better. So I finally convinced him to go to emergency because I don't know what's going on. and he had appendicitis. They took him straight in and took him up, and they said he had half an hour to live before he would have died from it rupturing. And if I had not made him get in that car, he would have died. All I had to do was wait a half an hour. I'm sitting there and I'm looking at him, and I tell him, I will kill you.
Got it?
If you think I'm kidding, try me. He was becoming more and more paranoid being at work. He felt that his co-workers were out to get him or do him harm and was trying to poison him, and at that point quit his job. After he quit working, Reginald's behavior started to change. The kids' friends would come by and visit with them. He would disappear into our bedroom. But he would be peeping out at them and would stare at us, looking to see what we're doing, acting strange. He never came out of the bedroom.
Mom, he's doing that thing again. He keeps staring at us.
But, he wasn't bothering anybody, and it didn't bother me, so I'm saying to myself, don't pay him any attention, that's just what he does.
He's just going through a rough patch. I think it's his nerves.
Can you tell him to stop?
We're not going to be isolated because you don't want to be bothered. I didn't think it was that serious. I just felt that this was something that our family was going through. He's acting strange, and more than one person is seeing it. But we're still trying to move forward to make it better, so okay, I can handle this, and we can work through this and get it together. I would be getting ready for bed, and Reggie was in there laying on the bed watching his television shows. He'd been doing that all day. And at a certain time of the evening, the TV would go off. They called it signed off. You'd get this snow, or you get this Target picture on there making this noise. He did not turn it off. He left it on. Just that all night long. And I'm like, can you turn that off? I gotta go to work in the morning. I need to go to sleep. And I can't sleep very well with that noise on there. He just ignored all of that.
Reggie, you gonna turn the TV off? Reggie!
I was not gonna get up and turn it off because I didn't know what that would do. I mean, he wasn't physically abusive with me, but I wasn't trying to get to that point. So I was just like, well, I'll just have to tune it out so that I could get some rest. You're so tired, you have no choice but to go to sleep. You can sleep through anything. So I just kind of blocked it out and got my rest and would get up and go to work. In the middle of the night, I woke up to smelling smoke. So I got up to see, and it was inside the house, in the kitchen area. So I went in there to see what was going on. And I had a rag doll. It was an ornament that you hang on the wall. And he had laid it on the stove and turned on a very low flame and set the doll on fire. I don't think it had been on there very long. It was just on there long enough to cause smoke, because all I had to do was take it off and put it under some water, and it was under control.
Reggie, why would you put this on the stove? You could have burned down the whole house.
He was in bed when I woke up to the smoke. So he had gone in there and done that and got back in bed. I'm like, what is wrong with you? Why would you turn the stove on and we're all sleeping? Why would you do something like that?
Reggie, please answer me. I can't help you if you don't talk to me.
But I just never got any response as to why. So it's like beating a dead horse, so why keep asking the same question if you're not going to get an answer? I had to let it go. But that made me more on my toes of, okay, now I gotta be aware that you might go in there and put something on the stove, I don't know what. It was actually strung up like in a noose by his neck, like it had been hung and had a hole in his heart. That was just devastating to me. I was just trying to make it through day by day. In my own mind, I guess I was thinking, what's going to happen now? What's he going to do tomorrow? Our youngest son, Miracles, had a little doll. It's a dog. And he slept with that dog. Well, I got up one morning, and as I go into the living room before I wake up the children, I see this doll. The doll was hanging up on the chandelier. I didn't know why it was up there. And my first thought was, oh, maybe they were playing, they got hung up there and they just didn't take it down. But as I looked closer, it was actually strung up, like in a noose. And it had a hole in his heart. So I know the kids did not do that. So I take it down before the kids see it up there. I don't know what their reaction would be to it.
Reggie! Why would you put this up there?
I say to Reggie, what was the purpose of you doing that? And he just kind of looks at me and he just never answered that question.
What are you doing, Reggie? Reggie! Tell me something!
It was like talking to myself, so why continue the conversation? I know that Reggie believed in voodoo. I know that he felt like there were certain things that you could do, that you could put a spell on somebody. So this is when things started becoming a little, what's going on with you? It sounded like incantations or chantings. I don't want to say speaking in tongue, but I certainly didn't know what he was saying. I'm not sure if he's saying something or singing something or talking to himself or what's going on. And so at that point, I decided to call the police. Somebody needs to come in here and do something because I don't know what to do. I sent the kids to their room and I called the police.
It's the police. Please open the door.
Soon as they knock on the door, whatever he's chanting, saying, or whatever in the room, he stops doing that.
Hello?
They say, can we come in? He says, yes. They go in there, they talk to him. I don't go in there. They're in there for about maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and they're talking to him, what's going on. I don't really hear what he's saying to them. And then they tell me that they're leaving.
You're not gonna do anything.
Ma'am, frankly, we can't do anything else.
And they said, no. I said, well, why aren't you taking him with you? And they said, well, he's coherent. He's answering our questions. Has he harmed you physically? I'm like, no.
He's no immediate threat to anyone.
But you heard him yourself.
He's in there talking crazy. I don't know what he's saying. Can't you take him out of here, take him to the hospital, take him somewhere? And they said no.
If he hurts you or any of your kids, certainly give us a call. But until then, this is the best we can do.
That was just devastating to me. I called the hospital and tried to talk to a psychiatrist to see what they could tell me. They told me I'd have to bring him in. I'm like, well, that's not happening because I can't get him to go anywhere. So I was between a rock and a hard place. One day, I walk into the kitchen. The phone is off the wall. It's clearly broken. So I'm thinking, is the fact that I called the police upsetting to him?
Why would you do this?
And he said, I don't need people listening in on any conversations or recording conversations.
Nobody is listening, Reggie. Why would anybody care about our phone calls?
I said, what people? What are you talking about? He thought the conversations on there were being recorded by somebody or listening to.
Who?
You know who?
If he was having one of those paranoid episodes, I need to be on alert with him. I just didn't know what he would do next or what he could be capable of doing. At that point, just a watchful eye on everything.
Off of me!
I woke up to a lot of commotion, and it was coming from the kids' room. I come into the hallway and I see them in the kids' room, and he was literally jumping on our oldest son.
Reggie!
He was beating on our oldest son. And I'm trying to pull him off of him.
Reggie, what has gotten into you?
Don't try and stand up for him.
When I got him to at least stop beating on him, I said, what did he do that's so bad? He knows what he did. He knows what he did.
Will you relax?
Don't tell me what to do. I can handle myself.
I said, sweetie, what is your daddy talking about? What did you do? He said, Mama, I don't know.
That boy's gonna get exactly what's coming to him. You hear me?
Yeah?
Exactly.
Well, you better step back or you're gonna get some too.
He's wondering what the heck is going on.
Why did he hit you?
I didn't do anything. Liar! I didn't!
He just kept saying, he knows what he did. He knows what he did. And I said, well, clearly he doesn't.
I'll handle this.
I said, are you okay? And he goes, yeah. And I said, okay, well, just go lay back down. And he went back to bed.
Reggie, living room, now!
They've done nothing wrong. They've never been disrespectful. They never even talked back to him.
What is going on, Reggie?
Now, I'm not going back to bed because I can't trust him to not go back in there.
Why would you do this?
Okay, so now you're taking sides. That's what
I'm
it
not
is?
taking sides, but this is unacceptable.
That boy got exactly what he had coming to him.
So I said, I don't know what he did or didn't do in your mind's eye, but I will tell you this.
I'm not playing games anymore. You understand?
He's my child. And if you ever put your hands on my son again like that, I will kill you.
Got it?
I said, if you think I'm kidding, try me. I never met anything so much in my life. He used to kind of help them with their homework and stuff.
And why is that one blank?
Having study sessions at the dining room table, and I just go around the table, who needs help with what? Reginald said something to Vaughn, and Vaughn said something back to him.
What did you say to me?
I said.
And he smacked him. Reggie smacked Vaughn. He smacked him in the face.
Stop! You get off of him!
I jumped up and I went and got in between them, trying to pull them apart.
Get off of him!
And then, in doing so, Reginald Sr. smacked me.
Mom, are you okay? Get off of him! Stop!
And the next thing I know, Reginald Jr. was on top of Reginald Sr.
It's not worth it! Get off of him!
And then Vaughn, all they were trying to do was wrestle him down to keep him from hitting anybody. After everything was over, all I could, hear my husband say was, you're dead meat, y'all dead meat, you're dead meat.
You shouldn't have done that.
That's the final straw. I'm done with it. Him jumping on the kids like that, I'm not having this. I'm not subjecting them to this. They didn't do anything to deserve any of this.
I'm done.
You think you're done, Reggie? This is over.
I told Reggie that I'm getting a divorce. I can't do this anymore. We already have a place, so you're the one that needs to go. Here's some money for you, traveling money. Go as far as it'll take you. Bye. And he didn't leave. He never went anywhere. And I told the kids, I said, okay, from now on, when you go to school, do not come home till you know that I'm home from work, because I can't protect you if I'm not here. I do know that in my mind, I felt like, okay, once I get this divorce, you definitely have to go because you can't stay here. The divorce papers were delivered, but I didn't know that they were delivered. He never said anything to me. I think he thought that I was not going to do that. At that point, things had kind of calmed down. We hadn't had any other incidents. When I left work, I was gonna go do something else, and I don't remember what that was, but in a voice, go home. This voice, go home, go home. And so that's what I did. I went home. We had a little dog, Cotton, and he didn't come to the door. The house was quiet. There was some music on, but it was really, really low. I thought, well, maybe Reggie was listening to it, but didn't hear him, didn't see him. He wasn't anywhere in the house. So I decided that I needed to check on the kids and see what they're doing and get them something to eat. their door to the bedroom was closed. So I opened the door. You know, I saw one in the bed. I said, oh, them sleepyheads, they're still in the bed.
Boys? Come on now with the games.
I said, hey, sleepyheads, y'all need to get up. It's in the afternoon. You done slept all day. What's up? Nobody was responding. So then I go in the room. And Reggie Jr.'s arm is up like this, you know, and I'm looking. And then that's when I saw the bullet hole in his head. I heard somebody scream, but I don't know who it was. But in actuality, it was me. And then I looked up, and then I saw Vaughn had a bullet hole in his head. I think everything was surreal then. I turned around and I looked at the articles. I pulled the covers back, and I saw his brains everywhere. And I just lost it. I'm not gonna make it. So, I'm sorry, I gotta let it. I called the police. I told them who I was. I told them my address. I told them my husband killed my children. He said help. I just was like frozen. And then from frozen to disbelief to, oh, where's Reggie? That was my thought. I'm like, he's got to be here somewhere. And I just told the police, I'll be standing in the middle of the street. I got to get out of here because I don't know where he is and I could be next. I told him my husband killed my children. And I don't know where he is. And everything else is pretty much a blur. I never went back into the house. A whole bunch of things was going through my head, but mostly disbelief. It's not my voice. This happens to other people. Doesn't happen to you. They're gonna get up and walk away. You know, this is a movie. This can't be happening. This is a picture of Reggie Jr., very studious. He's very kind-hearted. He'd help anybody with anything. He had this little crooked smile, you know, which let me know that you're up to something you're not supposed to be doing, but you don't want me to know what it is. This is Vaughn, my second oldest. He was the shy one. He was always keeping his hair so neat, and then it didn't take but a little bit of wind and it would be all over the place. This is my mischievous one. This is Niarchos. And you can tell by that smile, you never know what he's thinking. He didn't do anything bad, but he was always doing something. It makes me sad to think about them and that I can't hold them. It's very, very painful. And it's something that you never get over. I didn't know where he was. He had a gun and probably still had it. So if he could get close enough in the proximity of where I am, I could be next. My now brother-in-law sat there with a shotgun, literally, across his knees until they found Reggie. Somebody knocks on the door, said, "It's the police, can we come in?" He had been captured and they were bringing him back, and he was in Utah. I don't know where he was going. They told me that he had 2 baggage claim tickets, but he was only claiming 1 suitcase. He did not indicate that there was another bag that had been checked under the bus, and that's where the gun was.
I want to see him.
He claims to this day that he didn't do it, but who else? Who else would? Who else would have a reason to?
Is that correct, ma'am?
He's sitting there, I'm looking at him,
Ma'am.
that I'm answering questions.
Yes, that's correct.
But the whole time I was looking at him, I was just thinking, can I reach him? Can I get to him before they get to me? You know, how far away is he really? You know, how much damage can I do if I do get to him? Will it be enough to end his life? Give me the opportunity to get to him for 2 seconds. That's all I need is 2 seconds. And we won't have to have a trial. We won't have to have anything. And I'm willing to go to jail for that because I have nothing to live for. When I heard that he had been found guilty and was sentenced to death, I had a sense of relief that I would have justice for my boys. This is the shirt that I had on. We wore it in hopes that if Reggie would see us, he would see these shirts and he would know that we were there supporting, that justice was finally being done for these boys. We took our seats and we just kind of held each other's hand, you know, and just sat there and waited. The warden did ask him, did he have any last words? And he said no. But one of the last gestures that he made was to stick up both middle fingers. And that was his message. And made a very hard, conscious effort to make sure that they remained up throughout the whole ordeal. So we just kind of just sat there and, you know, trying to stay composed. That was the longest 10 minutes of my life. And then it was over. Finally, you get to know what it feels like not to draw another breath. And you don't get the chance to hurt anybody else ever again. And hopefully you'll rest in hell. to get through the last 36 years. But I don't think you ever cry enough.
They say the desert never forgets, that every footprint, every whisper, every secret buried under its sun-bleached crust is still there waiting for the right moment to claw its way back to the surface. In the summer of 1995, long before the case became a headline, long before the words "cold case" would send a shiver through an entire town, the Nevada desert held its breath and swallowed a story that no one was meant to hear. It began with a scream. No one reported a car, no one remembered, and a disappearance that spread through the community like a crack in glass, silent at first, then impossible to ignore. And now, after nearly 3 decades of dust and unanswered questions, the truth threatens to surface in a way that no one is ready for. The heat that year was unforgiving, the kind that boiled the horizon and made the air dance like it was alive. Tourists passing through on the highway would talk about mirages, shimmering shapes that looked almost human. Locals didn't laugh, not here, not after what happened, because late one July evening, just as the sun was fading into a blood-red smear, something was seen moving along the old service road that cut behind the abandoned Lucky Star gas station. Something or someone running, stumbling, vanishing. A shadow swallowed by a stretch of land that didn't offer mercy, didn't offer answers, didn't offer anything except the certainty that once you stepped out there, you were alone with whatever followed you. The missing girl's name was whispered for weeks afterward. Flyers plastered across windows curled in the heat photographs, bleaching under the sun's smiles, fading into ghostly outlines. People talked about her like she had evaporated, like the desert had simply claimed her as one of its own. Search teams combed through miles of sand and brush, but the ground gave them nothing. Not a footprint, not a shred of fabric. Not a single trace that a living person had taken her last breaths beneath the weight of the Nevada sky. The town held vigils, lit candles, said prayers, and waited for something, anything, that would break the silence. But silence is the one thing the desert offers endlessly, and it offered it in abundance. Detectives tried to stitch together a timeline, piecing together rumors, arguments, sightings at the diner on Highway 50. Everyone had a story. None of them matched. A truck driver said he saw her walking alone. A waitress insisted she left with someone in a dark sedan. A neighbor swore he heard her arguing with a man she knew. But nothing held. Every lead crumbled on contact. Every tip turned into vapor the moment investigators reached for it. It was as if the case wanted to stay hidden, as if something or someone kept pushing it deeper into the sand. And so the years dragged on. The flyers disintegrated. The case file thickened. The town moved forward, but never freely. There was always a shadow at the edge of memory, a cold reminder that someone had slipped through their fingers without leaving a fingerprint behind. A mystery sealed by sun and silence. People stopped asking questions out loud, but they never stopped thinking about them. Who took her? Where did she go? And why did the desert refuse to give her back? Then came the night the wind changed. A storm rolled across Nevada, ripping through dead brush and slamming against shuttered windows. Lightning cracked open the sky, illuminating ridges and dunes like flashbulbs, capturing a crime scene frozen in time. When morning arrived, something had shifted. Something long buried had been dragged to the surface, just enough to catch the attention of a hiker cutting through a restricted patch of land. Just enough to start a firestorm that no one was prepared for. But that moment belongs to another chapter, another breath. What matters now is the world as it was before the breakthrough, the world where the investigation had stalled, the world where people walked past the victim's house without daring to look at the windows, afraid they'd see someone still waiting for answers that would never come. Back in 1995, the detectives called it one of the strangest disappearances they'd ever worked. No signs of struggle, no trace of preparation, no peculiar habits or risky behavior that would explain why she vanished without a sound. Just a normal evening, a quiet walk, and then nothing. The kind of nothing that hangs over a family like a storm cloud for years, filling every room with a question mark. Her mother kept the porch light on every night, even when the electric bill doubled. Her father drove the highway again and again, mile after mile, hoping to catch a glimpse of a clue he must have missed. The sheriff, exhausted and defeated, stood at press conferences with his hat in his hands and told reporters they were doing everything they could, but even he knew the truth. There was nothing left to do. The trail had gone cold before it even began. Rumors seeped into the cracks left behind by the investigation. Some said she ran away. Others whispered she had been taken by someone passing through town. A few claimed the desert itself had swallowed her whole, a superstition older than the highway and twice as stubborn. But the most unsettling theory, the one people only shared in hushed tones, was that the culprit was someone local, someone they all knew, someone who lived among them, smiled among them, shopped at the same grocery store, stood in the same church pews, someone who walked freely while the case file collected dust in a drawer marked unsolved. The sheriff's department didn't want to believe it, but the longer the case stayed frozen, the louder that possibility grew. They re-interviewed old friends. They knocked on the same doors a second time, then a third. They went through her belongings, searching for a diary entry or a hidden note. Nothing. It was a ghost of a case, a puzzle with every piece missing, and the longer it stayed open, the more it haunted the people closest to it. One detective, young, stubborn, relentless, kept the file on his desk long after he was told to let it go. He visited the site every year on the anniversary, standing silently beneath the scorching sun, staring out across the flat expanse of earth that mocked him with its emptiness. He believed the truth was out there, buried not just in the sand, but in the actions of someone who had made a mistake. Someone who had slipped up even if no one realized it yet. He believed every cold case was a trap door waiting to open. But he didn't have the key. Not yet. As the years passed, the town changed. New stores opened. Old ones shut down. Children who weren't even born in 1995 grew up hearing the story in whispers, warning each other never to wander too far into the desert after dark. The victim's family moved away, unable to bear the weight of memories that refused to fade. The detective retired. The sheriff passed away. And still, the case sat there, a silent testimony to how quickly a life could vanish and how slowly justice could move. But there was one detail, small, strange, overlooked, that would eventually crack the case wide open. A detail that had been sitting in a sealed evidence bag for almost 3 decades, dismissed as irrelevant. A detail that never should have survived the desert heat, the storms, the years of neglect. A detail that waited patiently, like a ghost, tapping on the walls of time, begging someone to listen. No one knew it yet. No one could sense the shift beneath the surface. But the desert, in its own quiet way, was preparing to give up its secret. And when it did, the shockwave would rip through the town with a force no one could have predicted. Because some cold cases don't stay cold forever. Some stories refuse to die. And this one, this Nevada desert mystery, was about to rise from the dust. Morning in the Nevada desert doesn't arrive gently. It crashes down with a blinding light that sweeps across the sand like a search beam, exposing every ridge, every scar, every forgotten object the night tried to hide. The sun doesn't rise, it strikes. And on the morning after the storm, when the sky still carried the scent of lightning and the air shimmered with heat rising from soaked earth, something protruded from the ground just enough to catch the eye of the hiker who dared to wander where locals said not to. Just enough to twist the fate of a town that had convinced itself the past was finally quiet. He wasn't from here. Outsiders never knew what the desert could reveal after a storm. They didn't understand that rain in a place like this didn't cleanse it unearthed. It dragged secrets toward the surface like a hand reaching from a shallow grave. And as he paused, squinting at the object half buried near a cluster of mesquite, the desert seemed to hold its breath again, as if waiting to see whether he would walk past like so many others before him. But he didn't. He approached, knelt down, brushed aside the wet sand, and the moment his fingers touched what lay beneath something old and forgotten, finally stirred. It wasn't bone, not yet, not something as definitive as that. It was fabric, ripped, sun-bleached, but unmistakably human-made. A scrap of clothing caught on a root preserved just enough to hold shape. Most would have dismissed it as trash left behind by travelers or campers, but he noticed the stitching, the strange pattern, the way the fibers had resisted decay longer than they should. Something about it felt wrong, too deliberate, too still. He took a photo with his phone more out of instinct than certainty and sent it to the sheriff's department with a message that sounded almost embarrassed. Might be nothing, but you should see this. He didn't know that he had just reopened a wound that had never truly healed. He didn't know that a single scrap of cloth could hold 3 decades of silence hostage. He didn't know the weight of what he had touched. By noon, deputies had already sealed off the area. A thin perimeter of yellow tape fluttered violently in the dry wind as if trying to escape the poles that held it. The air vibrated with radio static and whispered speculation. Younger officers asked older ones why everyone looked so grim, so tense, so haunted. They didn't understand. They weren't here in '95. They didn't grow up seeing the victim's face staring back from every telephone pole. They didn't feel the emptiness that settled over the community like a shadow that refused to shrink. They only knew the name from an old case file gathering dust in the basement, but the older deputies, the ones who remembered the search parties, the vigils, the tears they felt something shifting inside the moment that scrap of fabric was found. A shift they didn't dare name yet. When the detective assigned to cold cases arrived, he didn't speak. He stood there for a long moment, staring out across the dunes, trying to steady himself as memories he'd never lived through but had studied obsessively came rushing back. He knew every detail of the 1995 file. Every discrepancy. Every dead end. Every photograph of the missing girl, smiling through a life she never got to finish. And now, as he knelt by the disturbed earth, brushing away the sand with gloved hands, he felt the weight of something that had been dormant suddenly waking up. He recognized the fabric instantly. He'd seen it in the photos, a distinctive pattern part of the shirt the victim had been wearing the night she disappeared. It shouldn't have survived, not after so many summers baking under the sun, not after storms that ripped branches from trees, but here it was stubborn and defiant, like a message preserved by the desert itself. As if the land had been waiting for the right moment, not earlier, not later, but now. The medical examiner arrived next, her expression composed but tight. She didn't like being called out for scraps. She wanted remains, evidence, something tangible. But as she examined the soil disturbance, her eyes narrowed. Something about the configuration felt unnatural, as if the ground had been tampered with long ago, then sealed by time until the storm pried it open again. She requested a full excavation. And just like that, the desert became a crime scene again. As the digging began, reporters sensed the tension in the air and converged like vultures. Helicopters hovered overhead, kicking up clouds of dust that rolled across the plain. Microphones appeared over shoulders. Questions flew. Is this connected to the 1995 case where remains found? Is the missing girl finally coming home? But the sheriff refused to answer, his jaw set like stone. He knew one wrong sentence could ignite panic. The town had been quiet for years, restless, quiet, fragile quiet, but quiet nonetheless. And this discovery threatened to rip everything open again. By late afternoon, the team reached a layer of soil that didn't match the rest. Softer, darker, disturbed. And then the first unmistakable sound, the metallic scrape of a shovel hitting something solid. A hush fell instantly. Every deputy froze. Even the desert wind seemed to stop. The medical examiner stepped forward, crouched down, and brushed away the remaining sand with trembling fingers. A fragment of bone emerged, small, pale, fragile. Not an animal. Human. The radio chatter went silent. No one breathed. The medical examiner exhaled slowly, the sound loud enough to slice through the tension. She whispered the words everyone dreaded and hoped for in equal measure. Call the detective. We're dealing with a body. By midnight, floodlights bathed the area in harsh white light, casting long, stark shadows across the ground. The hum of generators created an eerie mechanical heartbeat that echoed across the plain. Forensic teams worked in silence. Every bone was lifted, delicately placed into evidence bags labeled photographed. The ground yielded more than anyone expected: partial remains, not scattered, not dragged away by wildlife, but intentionally buried, shallow enough to be rushed, deep enough to be hidden. A makeshift grave dug by someone who either panicked or didn't have time to finish the job. The medical examiner studied the remains and nodded grimly. Based on the condition, the age, the location, this wasn't random. This was their girl, their missing girl, the one whose name had haunted the town like an echo no one could silence. They wouldn't say it officially yet. They needed DNA. But in their eyes, you could see the truth taking shape. The sheriff stood several feet away, arms crossed tightly, watching the excavation unfold. He remembered the original case more vividly than he wanted to. He remembered the press breathing down their necks. He remembered the parents blaming themselves. He remembered the long nights staring at maps, photos, interviews, wondering where they had failed. And now, as he watched the remains being lifted from the ground, he felt an old guilt claw its way back into his chest. He whispered, "We were so close. We were so damn close." The detective beside him shook his head. "No, we never had a chance. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing." But even as he said it, uncertainty crept into his voice. Because there was something strange about the burial, too careless to be professional, too rushed to be controlled, yet too precise to be random. As if the killer had been terrified, pressed for time, or interrupted. Near the foot of the grave, something else emerged, a metal object, tarnished but intact. A locket. Inside, a faded photograph. Two faces. One belonging to the missing girl, the other unidentified. The image was smudged by moisture, but the outline of the second person was unmistakable male, older than her, smiling directly at the camera. The locket changed everything. It wasn't hers. That much the family had sworn. She never wore jewelry, never owned anything like it, which meant one thing: the locket belonged to someone connected to her disappearance, someone who had been close enough to be captured in a photo with her, someone who might not have intended to leave the locket behind, but did. By dawn, the remains were on their way to the state lab. Evidence bags filled an entire table under a tent. Reporters were scrambling for statements. The town was awake, buzzing, panicked, whispering the same story over and over. They found her. They found her. After all these years, they finally found her. But the sheriff wasn't celebrating. Neither was the detective. They knew what came next would be darker, harder, and far more dangerous than anything the investigation had faced in the past, because a body in the desert meant one thing: the killer had left something behind. And killers who leave things behind make mistakes. But killers who make mistakes become desperate. And a desperate man is the most dangerous kind. The desert had given up its first secret. It would not be the last. Dawn spread across the desert like a blade, slicing the sky open with streaks of red and gold, exposing the land with a brutal clarity that made every shadow look guilty. The excavation site still buzzed with a tense electric hum. Deputies murmuring into radios, generators, rumbling cameras, clicking as evidence techs sifted through soil that had been undisturbed for nearly 30 years. But beneath that noise lay something deeper, something that pulsed like a heartbeat. The unmistakable sense that the past, once considered dead, had clawed its way back to life. The locket lay under a harsh beam of artificial light, sealed inside a clear evidence bag hanging from a hook, like an accusation suspended in air. The photograph inside faded. Warped ghosts of two faces trapped in metal had already ignited a frenzy. The girl was unmistakable. Even after decades, even distorted by moisture, her features were burned into the memory of anyone who lived here during the summer of 1995. But the man was a mystery, wrapped in a problematic truth. No one recognized him. Not immediately, not loudly, but recognition did flicker in the eyes of those who had been around long enough, those who still carried the old town map in their heads, those who remembered who lived where and who belonged to whom. No one said it out loud. Not yet. but the unspoken question hung thick in the scorching air. Why was she smiling beside a man no one ever mentioned? And why did that man's locket end up buried with her body? The detective assigned to the case stared at that locket for a long, heavy moment. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry, it was a narrative waiting to be decoded, a secret someone had tried to bury but failed to hide. The photograph told him one thing with absolute certainty: the missing girl wasn't alone the night she vanished. Someone was with her. Someone confident enough, familiar enough, close enough for her to smile that way, and someone dangerous enough to make sure that smile was the last image captured of her alive. He looked at the sheriff, a man who carried too many failures on his shoulders and wasn't eager to add another. The sheriff's jaw clenched, deep lines forming around his mouth. He didn't want to go where the evidence was pointing, but the detective could see it in his eyes. He recognized the man too. "Say it," the detective said quietly, his voice barely a thread. The sheriff shook his head once, slow, stubborn, "Not until we're sure." But the desert didn't care about hesitation. The desert never did. The remains were officially confirmed by mid-morning. DNA matched the missing girl with 99.8% certainty. The announcement rippled across the county like a tremor rattling windows, unsettling sleep, reopening wounds people thought had scarred over long ago. Old-timers gathered outside the diner on Highway 50, shaking their heads, voices weighed down with memories. Younger residents whispered the name with cautious curiosity. They'd grown up hearing the story but never imagined they'd live to see it surface again. But while the town murmured, the detective was already moving. He dove back into the 1995 case file, spreading its pages across a metal table under a tent that flapped angrily in the wind. Yellowing documents, handwritten notes, photographs of smiling faces, search teams forming lines across dunes, aerial shots of the desert when it still felt like a place rather than a threat. He scanned the list of persons of interest, from the original investigation names, scribbled in faded ink, annotated crossed out. He searched for anyone who could match the blurred outline in the locket's photo. Nothing. That was the first warning sign. Because in the summers of 1995, investigators interviewed everyone within a 50-mile radius. They spoke with family, friends, acquaintances, coworkers, strangers, truckers, drifters. If this man had been part of her life, he should have been in this file. But he wasn't. Not even a footnote, not even a rumor. It meant one of two things, both of them equally troubling. Either she had been seeing someone in secret, or the person in the photograph had been deliberately erased from the original investigation. Outside, the wind kicked up again, sending sand swirling in small, angry spirals around the evidence tent. It felt like the desert was listening, like it didn't want these pages turned. As the detective was sorting through the last stack of documents, a deputy rushed toward him, gripping a tablet, face flushed from the heat. "We found something else." The detective stood quickly. Where? In the secondary grid, near the north edge of the grave. He followed the deputy across the marked squares of disturbed earth, where forensic teams continued their slow, methodical work. The secondary grid was smaller, an area initially thought to be scatter from the storm. But now, under the sun, something metallic glinted sharply. A rusted key ring. 2 keys. No markings, no tags, no explanation. They looked ordinary, painfully ordinary, but nothing about their presence here was random. One key was standard, a house key. The other was stranger, less common, with a narrow shaft and distinctive cuts that looked custom. The detective held the evidence bag up to the light. Keys to what? No one answered. Because the question wasn't really what, it was whose. He knew the next step. They needed to compare these keys to old property records, old lock manufacturers, even businesses that no longer existed. But a sinking feeling tugged at him. The killer had been careful. If these keys had stayed buried for 30 years, they meant something important, something the killer didn't intend to lose. Nearby, the medical examiner knelt again beside the grave, studying the soil, analyzing the depth, mapping the pattern of decomposition. She spoke quietly, as if afraid the desert might overhear. This wasn't a single burial. The soil isn't consistent. Something was moved. The detective stiffened. Moved. Yes, look here. She pointed to a darker patch beneath where the remains had been. This layer shows older disturbance. But the upper layer where we found the fabric, that's newer. Maybe a few years newer. The killer came back. The words hit like a blow. Someone had returned to this grave. Not just once, more than once. The sheriff approached, overhearing just enough to pale beneath his sunburned skin. Why would someone come back after all these years? The medical examiner didn't look up. Guilt, panic, or to hide something they missed. The detective thought of the locket, the keys, the torn fabric, pieces of a puzzle that someone had tried to rearrange long after the crime. Someone who might have believed the desert would keep its silence forever. Someone who underestimated the persistence of storms and guilt. He felt the old case tightening around him like a vice. Suddenly, a shout came from the far edge of the excavation site, another deputy waving his arms, signaling frantically. The detective and sheriff rushed over. A small object lay in the sand, half exposed by the brush of a boot, a circular pin rusted around the edges, the design barely recognizable beneath grime. When they cleaned it enough to see the logo, a chill raced through the group. A name from the town's past. A business that closed in 1996. A workplace the victim used to visit. The sheriff murmured almost to himself, "No, not him, not that family." The detective heard the tremor in his voice. "You knew someone connected to this." The sheriff didn't answer. He didn't have to, because the pin belonged to someone they all remembered. Someone who'd left town abruptly after the disappearance. Someone who had been questioned briefly in 1995, but released. Someone whose name had been quietly whispered back then just as quietly dismissed. A name the sheriff had hoped never to hear again. Before the detective could press him further, another deputy jogged over holding a small evidence bag. Inside it, a brittle piece of paper edges, decomposed writing, barely legible. They scanned it under a portable light, trying to decipher the faded ink. Slowly, agonizingly, the letters emerged. A date, a time, a location, and a single name written at the bottom. A meeting, a planned meeting. The night the girl disappeared. The detective's pulse kicked hard. This is it. This is the link. She wasn't alone. She met someone out here. The sheriff swallowed hard. She met him. The detective's eyes sharpened. Who? The sheriff closed his eyes as if saying the name would summon something dangerous from beneath the sand. Finally, he whispered it, a name the detective had seen only once, buried deep in the old file attached to a single interview that led nowhere. A name scratched out in the file, literally crossed out with black pen. A name connected to the newly discovered pin. A name connected to the photograph in the locket. A name that should have been investigated properly 30 years ago, but wasn't. The detective stared at the sheriff. Why was he crossed out? Why was he dismissed? The sheriff didn't look up. Because someone told us he couldn't have done it. Who? The sheriff hesitated. Then, with a voice heavy enough to bend metal, he answered, her family. The desert fell silent again, like it was listening, like it was remembering, like it knew this was only the beginning. The name hung in the air like a curse, heavy, familiar, unwelcome. A name the sheriff clearly never wanted to speak again. A name that felt like it should have remained buried with the years that had swallowed the case whole. But now it was back rising from the desert floor with the same slow inevitability as the bones the team had been pulling from the sand. The detective didn't react immediately. He let the silence stretch, let it breathe, let the weight of the sheriff's admission sink in like the heat pressing down on all of them. Her family, the detective finally repeated, his voice a low, controlled echo. They protected him. The sheriff didn't answer. Not directly. His eyes drifted toward the horizon where the dunes rolled endlessly, a reminder that the desert had always been bigger than the people who tried to control it. But the detective saw the truth in his expression. The family had intervened nearly 30 years ago. Someone had insisted this man, this now resurfacing name, was innocent. Someone convinced investigators that he couldn't have hurt her. And in a small town, when grief becomes the loudest voice, people listen. People trust. People make mistakes. The detective stepped back from the grave, the heat rippling off the sand like waves from an unseen fire. He knew the next step. Interviews, background checks, pulling old records that had been left untouched for decades, but something inside him felt colder than the shadow of the tent behind him. Because if the family had protected this man back then, they had done so with purpose, with conviction. And if they were wrong, if they had defended the very person who had taken her into the desert? The tragedy wasn't just her disappearance. It was the betrayal wrapped inside it. But betrayal wasn't new out here. The desert had seen its share. Deputies continued combing the secondary grid. The wind picked up again, dragging fine sand across their boots, erasing footprints as fast as they were made. Evidence techs worked silently. Faces drawn as if speaking too loudly might disturb whatever force lingered beneath the surface. Another deputy approached the detective with a clipboard full of preliminary findings, soil analysis, decomposition, stages, item placement, but he barely glanced at it. His focus remained locked on the newly revived name, a name that now felt radioactive, a name that shouldn't have been crossed out, a name that connected to the pin, the grave, the locket photograph, a name that had been quietly slipped out of the investigation 30 years ago because the family insisted he was innocent. The detective's mind raced overlapping timelines and motives, searching for the cracks. Cold cases were rarely just about evidence. They were about people. And people lied when pain became too heavy to carry. The sheriff walked toward the mobile command unit, shoulders slumped under a weight invisible to everyone else. The detective followed the two of them, stepping inside the cramped space filled with the hum of air conditioning, fluorescent lights, buzzing whiteboards, lined with new photos of old evidence. The sheriff sat down slowly, like the years had suddenly caught up to him all at once. He was close to the family, the sheriff said, finally, voice low. Too close. They trusted him. They said he looked out for her, drove her home sometimes, helped around the house. Her father... He hesitated. Her father wouldn't hear anything against him, wouldn't allow it. The detective crossed his arms. Did you believe him? The sheriff let out a long breath, the kind that leaked regret. Back then, I believed the father was grieving. I believed he knew his daughter better than any of us. I believed he wouldn't protect a man who could hurt her. He shook his head. But I also believed we'd find her alive. And when you didn't, we stopped believing in a lot of things. The detective leaned closer. What was his relationship to her friend, mentor, family friend, something else? The sheriff rubbed his temples. He was older than her, too old for the kind of attention he gave her. But this town? Back then, no one asked questions unless they had to. People minded their business. And when she vanished, we did look into him, briefly, but her parents pushed back hard. Her mother said he was harmless. Her father said he was loyal. They begged us not to drag his name through the mud on top of everything else. His voice cracked, and we listened. Outside, a gust rattled the trailer, the sound like fingers tapping angrily on the walls. The detective didn't flinch. What happened to him after the disappearance? He left, the sheriff answered quietly. Packed up and left town within weeks. Said he didn't want to deal with the rumors, the stares. No forwarding address, no contact, gone. The detective stiffened. That didn't strike anyone as suspicious. It did, the sheriff whispered, but without evidence, without the family supporting an investigation, we had nothing. The detective picked up the photograph from the locket still sealed in its evidence bag and held it up. The faded smile, the hint of a shoulder, the unmistakable outline of the man beside her, even though time had blurred his face into an unrecognizable shadow, but something about his posture, the way he leaned in the ownership in the gesture. It spoke volumes. Find him, the detective said. We need to find him. As he stepped back outside, the desert wind had risen again, a constant whisper threading through the air like a warning. A deputy jogged toward him from the excavation site, panting slightly. We've expanded the search perimeter. There's more. The detective followed him across uneven ground marked by flags and stakes. Farther north, near a cluster of rocks half buried by drifting sand, a tech was crouched, brushing debris away from something metallic, protruding from the earth. It looked small, unimportant at first glance, another scrap of forgotten material. But as they unearthed it, fully, the shape became clear. A watch, broken, cracked glass, leather strap, mostly rotted. But the engraving on the back, barely legible, made the detective freeze. To M, forever proud of you. A gift. Personal. Emotional. The kind of message given by a parent or mentor. The kind of inscription meant for someone cared about deeply. The detective turned to the sheriff. You know who M is? The sheriff nodded, dread creeping across his features. Yes, he used to wear that watch every day. He said it was the most important thing he'd ever been given. The detective stared at the watch again. Then why is it buried here? Maybe he dropped it, the sheriff murmured. No, the detective said. He wouldn't have dropped this, and if he did, he would have come back for it. And then it hit him. The medical examiner's words. The killer came back. This watch wasn't dropped the night of the disappearance. It was placed, hidden, buried intentionally, almost like someone wanted it found, or wanted it lost forever. The desert wind howled swirling sand around the detective's legs as he pieced the timeline together. The locket, the keys, the watch, and the disrupted soil layers that suggested someone revisited the grave years after the initial burial. There were two possibilities, both dangerous. Either the killer returned to move evidence, or someone else discovered the grave long ago and chose not to report it. Either way, someone in this town had been living with a secret for years. The detective turned abruptly. We're reopening every interview, every witness, everyone who knew her, everyone who left town after she vanished. And her family? The sheriff asked, voice barely above a whisper. The detective paused, the desert light casting jagged shadows across his face. Especially her family. The sheriff's eyes widened. I think people lie to protect the truth they're afraid of, the detective said coldly. And they lie hardest when the truth is someone they love. A deputy called out from across the site holding another evidence bag high, something small, crumpled, discolored. The detective rushed over. Inside the bag was a fragment of paper, maybe torn from a notebook, the ink smeared but certain words still visible under the right angle. Don't tell anyone. Tonight. Alone. Trust me. The detective felt his stomach twist. The writing was hers. The message was his. The evidence wasn't pointing to a stranger. It wasn't pointing to a drifter or a random predator. It pointed to someone she trusted. Someone the family trusted. Someone the sheriff's department should have investigated properly in 1995. But didn't. The detective's pulse pounded in his ears. He turned to the sheriff, voice steel. Give me his full name. The sheriff whispered it like a confession. A name that tied everything together. A name that had been crossed out in the file, not by accident, but by influence. A name that vanished from town as soon as she did. A name the desert had been holding on to like a secret. The detective stared out across the dunes, the wind whipping around him like a warning, and spoke the truth aloud for the first time in almost 30 years. He planned to meet her, he took her, and he thought he buried the evidence forever. He looked down at the bones, the watch, the locket, the torn paper pieces of a long-buried story finally stitching themselves together. And now he whispered, "We're going to drag him out of whatever shadow he's hiding in," because the desert had spoken, and it would not be silenced again. The desert didn't rest that night. Even after the excavation lights were shut down, even after the last deputy climbed into his cruiser and pulled away, even after the command tent was zipped closed and the equipment locked up, something in the air refused to go still. The wind moved differently now, less like a breeze and more like a warning scraping across the sand. As if the land itself knew a truth was rising, a truth that had been sealed beneath it for nearly 30 years. A truth that could tear the past open like a wound that never healed. The detective stood alone, near the perimeter tape, staring at the dark expanse stretching toward the horizon. He felt the cold case pulsing under the surface, alive now no longer dormant. The name the sheriff had whispered earlier still echoed in his head, bouncing in the silence, like a voice trapped in an empty room. A name tied to the watch. A name tied to the locket. A name tied to the note. A name crossed out of the file, not from lack of evidence, but from loyalty, from protection, from fear. He watched the last glimmer of light fade behind the hills and open the evidence bag containing the torn note, her handwriting fragile as breath, written in panic or trust, impossible to tell. A few phrases were still legible. Don't tell anyone. Tonight. Trust me. And the name at the bottom, smudged but unmistakable. This wasn't a random meeting. This wasn't a coincidence. She had planned to see him, and he had planned something else entirely. The sheriff stepped out of the command trailer and approached slowly, boots crunching on the hardened sand. His face looked older than it had that morning, lines deeper, eyes darker. regret aging him faster than time ever could. "We should head back," he muttered, but the detective didn't move. You knew, the detective said, soft but sharp. You knew this would lead back to him. The sheriff swallowed hard. "I knew the possibility existed. You tried to avoid it." He didn't deny it. Because the family, because her father was wrong, the detective snapped, and she paid the price. The sheriff closed his eyes, a pained breath escaping him. He trusted the wrong man. We all did. The detective shook his head. You didn't trust him. You trusted the father. The accusation hit like a slap. The sheriff looked away into the desert darkness, into the place where the girl's life had ended and the lie had begun. A lie that had spread like poison, stalling the investigation for decades, burying answers, burying justice. "You think I don't know?" that he whispered. "You think I haven't replayed that summer 1,000 times? I should have pushed harder. I should have ignored him. But you weren't here. You didn't see the way he broke down, the way he begged us not to go after the one person he believed cared about her, the way he said we'd tear the town apart, chasing ghosts." The detective's jaw clenched, and instead a killer walked free. A long silence stretched between them, heavy as the heat clinging to the night. Finally, the detective exhaled sharply. "We need to find him." "We will," the sheriff replied, voice steady now. "But after 30 years, he could be anywhere. People like him don't just disappear," the detective said. "They build new identities, new friends, new lives. But they don't change who they are." He held up the evidence bag containing the watch, and sooner or later, they slip. The sheriff nodded slowly. "Tomorrow morning, we'll pull old employment records, DMV logs, tax filings, anything tied to him. But tonight, we work," the detective cut in. "This case hasn't slept in 30 years. Neither will we." The sheriff didn't argue. They drove back to the station under a sky streaked with faint stars, the desert stretching out on either side like an ocean drained of water. The town below was quiet houses lit softly from within, unaware that an old nightmare had risen. But as they entered the sheriff's office, the quiet shattered. A deputy rushed toward them with a folder clutched in shaking hands. "Sir, you need to see this." The detective grabbed the file. "What is it?" "Copies of old service logs, phone records from '95. We digitized them last year." The deputy pointed at a highlighted line. "This number called the victim's house 5 times the week she disappeared, late at night." The detective scanned the column. Caller ID didn't exist back then, not reliably, but the originating number had been preserved. He froze. The number matched one tied to the man they were now hunting. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was the address it was registered to, a property 5 miles outside town, one that had burned down in 1996 in what was ruled at the time a faulty wiring incident. The property had belonged not to the man, but to her father. The detective's breath caught. Why would he be calling from her father's old property? The sheriff took the page, eyes narrowing. No, that land wasn't his. He didn't let anyone use it. Then how did those calls come from there? The detective challenged. The sheriff looked rattled. Unless they were made after he left, after he moved away. That doesn't explain the year on the record, the detective pressed. The calls came before the disappearance. The room seemed to shrink. The sheriff lowered the folder slowly. Her father must have known. Known what? The detective snapped. That the man was using the property, the sheriff whispered. Maybe he allowed it. Maybe he didn't. But he must have known there were calls. They both fell silent. A chilling possibility formed, slow creeping, undeniable. Her father hadn't simply defended the man out of loyalty. He defended him because he knew something. Something he never told investigators. Something that made him protect the man even after his daughter vanished. The detective stepped back, the implications ricocheting in his mind. He didn't protect the man out of ignorance. He did it out of guilt. "We don't know," that the sheriff said quickly, but his voice lacked conviction. "We do," the detective said. "Because the calls came from his property, because he insisted the man was innocent, because he blocked the investigation before it even started." His voice dropped to a cold whisper. He knew she was meeting him. He knew she trusted him, and he did nothing to stop it. The sheriff stood still, his eyes hollowing. "You're saying her father helped cover this up?" The detective didn't flinch. "I'm saying her father knew more than he ever told you." The sheriff rubbed his forehead, grief and disbelief warring across his expression. He lost his daughter. Why would he protect the man who took her? Maybe he didn't know, the detective said. Maybe he thought their relationship was innocent. Maybe he believed the man would keep her safe. Maybe he realized too late. His voice hardened. Or maybe he was protecting his own pride. What do you mean? If the town knew he allowed a grown man that close to his teenage daughter, people would question him, judge him, blame him. The detective's eyes darkened, so he shut it down, buried it, just like the killer buried her. The sheriff sank into a chair. He never said a word. He didn't have to, the detective murmured. The evidence speaks for him. He looked at the pins on the board, the notes, the timelines, the faded photos. All these years, he said quietly, we chased ghosts and strangers. But the truth was right here, in this town. A man everyone trusted, a man the girl trusted, a man her father defended. The sheriff whispered, "What if he's dead?" Then we find the grave, the detective said, but I don't think he's dead. Men like him survive by disappearing. He had practice. He lifted the watch again, staring at the engraving. "To M, forever proud of you." What was he proud of? The detective asked softly. Taking her under his wing or getting away with murder. Before the sheriff could respond, the door burst open. Another deputy rushed inside. "Sir, you need to come look at this. Someone just arrived at the station, a woman. Says she has information about the man you're looking for." The detective stiffened. "Who is she?" The deputy swallowed, eyes wide. "She says she's his sister." The room fell silent. The sheriff rose slowly. The detective stood straighter, pulse tightening. The deputy continued, voice trembling. "And she says he's back in Nevada." The words crashed through the room like an explosion. He wasn't gone. He wasn't dead. He had returned. And the desert, as if it already knew, shuddered under the weight of the truth about to break loose. She stood in the lobby like a ghost who had finally stepped out of the shadows, a woman wrapped in a weathered jacket, hair pulled back, tight eyes, sharp, with something that looked like fear or guilt or both. The detective recognized that look instantly. It was the look of someone who'd been rehearsing the same sentence for years, but never found the courage to speak it. The sheriff approached her, first careful, cautious, as if any sudden movement might cause her to bolt. "You said you're his sister," the sheriff said gently, though the strain in his voice made it tremble. "You're here about the man we're looking for." Her lips parted, but no sound came. She swallowed hard, clutching her purse strap with white-knuckled desperation. Finally, in a voice barely stronger than a whisper, she answered. He came back. Those 3 words cut through the room like a blade. The detective stepped closer, eyes locked on her face, studying every twitch, every tremor. When he asked quietly, 3 days ago. She took a shaky breath. He showed up at my house, middle of the night, unannounced. I hadn't seen him in almost 20 years. She shook her head, voice fraying. He looked different, older, tired, but dangerous in a way he didn't used to be. The detective exchanged a glance with the sheriff. Dangerous, a word that fit too well. What did he want, the detective asked. She hesitated. He said he needed a place to stay, just for a night. He said he was passing through. Her eyes flicked upward, but I knew that wasn't true. He wasn't passing through. He was hiding. The word hung heavy. Hiding. The detective's jaw tightened. Did he say from what? She nodded once. He said something was happening. Something from the past was coming back. He said the desert was giving up its secrets. Her voice cracked. Those were his exact words. A chill slid through the room. The detective felt it like a cold finger trailing down his spine. The sheriff's mouth tightened into a thin line. He knew about the grave, the detective said. The woman squeezed her eyes shut. I think he did. He seemed afraid, agitated. He wouldn't sit still. He kept asking about the old town, about people he used to know about, whether anyone had been digging up trouble. Her voice dropped to a tremor. When I asked what he meant, he yelled at me. Told me not to ask questions. Did he mention her? The detective pressed. Her face crumpled slightly, but she nodded. He said her name once, quietly, like he was testing how it felt after so many years. Tears began to gather in her eyes. And he said people should have forgotten by now. The sheriff swore under his breath. The detective kept his voice level. Where is he now? She hesitated. This time it wasn't fear. It was guilt. I don't know, she finally whispered. He left before sunrise. He said he had to check something. Said he'd be back in a week. She shook her head. But after he left, I saw the news. I saw the reports about the desert, about the remains, about the breakthrough. She looked up at the detective eyes filled with terror. I think that's why he came back. I think he's terrified someone will find out what he did. The sheriff's face hardened. Why come back here then? Why not run farther? She wiped a tear away. Because he always comes back here. Everything he ever did, good or bad, ties back to this place, this town, that girl. Her voice cracked. He isn't passing through. He's circling something, something unfinished. The detective spoke quietly, forcing her to meet his eyes. He came back to see if the past had stayed buried. She flinched at the word buried. I need to know everything he said. Where he might go, who he might talk to, what places he still remembers. She looked down, fingers trembling. He still remembers the old workshop, the one behind the auto yard. He used to go there when he was upset, when he needed to think. She inhaled sharply. And he mentioned the father, her father. Asked if he was still alive. The detective froze. The sheriff paled. He said that the sheriff asked? She nodded. Yes, he said he had unfinished business. The detective didn't waste another second. He spun toward the command center doors, grabbing his jacket. Where are you going? The sheriff asked. To find her father, the detective said coldly. If the man is back, he'll go to the one person who protected him. The woman's voice trembled behind him. Please, you don't understand. My brother, he was troubled, but he wasn't always. The detective cut her off with a calm that was sharper than anger. Troubled people don't bury girls in the desert. She sank into a chair, sobbing quietly. Outside, the night pressed close against the windows, heavy and hot. The detective stepped into the heat, the sheriff at his side, both moving with the urgency of men who knew they were running out of time. The father's house sat on the outskirts of town, its porch light glowing dimly, swaying gently in the wind. When they pulled up, the house looked unchanged, aged, worn, sagging under the weight of years and mistakes. The detective knocked hard on the door. Silence. He knocked again. Finally, the door creaked open, revealing a frail man with trembling hands and eyes clouded by grief that had never lifted. What do you want? The father murmured. The detective didn't ease into it. We found the grave. The man's face went white. We found items that don't belong to her, the detective continued. Things that belong to him. The father's jaw clenched, the muscles in his thin neck tightening. I don't know anything about that, he said, but his voice was thin, breaking. And your property, the detective said softly. Calls were made from your old land. Calls to your house. Calls from him. For a moment, the father didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe. Then slowly, something inside him shattered. His shoulders sagged, his knees buckled slightly. His voice, when it came, was barely audible. I tried to stop it. The detective went still. The sheriff stepped forward. Stop what? The father shut his eyes, tears slipping down the creases of his face. I told her not to see him. I told her he wasn't right, but she trusted him. She thought he cared. His breath hitched, and he came to me. He begged me not to let people think he hurt her, said it would destroy him. And after she disappeared, after you questioned him. His voice cracked like dry wood. He told me it wasn't his fault. He told me she ran. And you believed him, the detective whispered. The father shook his head violently. No, but I wanted to. I needed to. Because if he did it, then it meant I let him into her life. It meant I was the one who put her in danger. He crumpled into a chair. I couldn't live with that. The detective's voice dropped to a deadly quiet. Where is he, sir? The father swallowed hard guilt, twisting his features. He said he needed to go somewhere familiar, somewhere no one would look, somewhere connected to her. His voice fell to a whisper. The old mine road. The detective froze. The sheriff stiffened beside him. The old mine road? A place no one used anymore. A place full of abandoned shafts and forgotten equipment. A place where screams could vanish into the earth and never return. A place where she once loved to take photographs. A place she trusted. A place he might use again. The detective shot toward the door, adrenaline surging. But as he stepped onto the porch, he stopped. There in the dirt. Fresh tire tracks, winding away from the house, heading toward the desert, toward the mine road, toward him. The killer was already on the move, and the desert, restless and dark, was waiting. The tire tracks sliced through the dirt like fresh wounds, sharp, deliberate, recent. The detective crouched over them, running his fingers just above the surface, feeling the heat radiating upward. The desert kept time in its own way, and these tracks were minutes old, not hours. The killer had been here, not sometime today, not earlier in the week, here, tonight. Staring at the same house, looking at the same door, breathing the same air, and then turning away into the darkness. The sheriff knelt beside him, eyes tight with fear. We missed him by minutes. The detective rose, slowly scanning the horizon where the tracks vanished into the pitch-black line of desert. Not minutes, he said. Seconds. The night was thick, almost suffocating, the kind of darkness that swallowed sound and warped distance. The detective listened, really listened, letting the desert speak. Somewhere far off, an engine echoed faintly, carried by the wind, and then smothered. The killer wasn't just leaving. He was heading somewhere specific. "Light the cruisers," the detective barked. "We're going after him." The sheriff hesitated, gripping his arm. "He's heading toward the mine road. Those shafts are unstable. If he goes underground, that's why we don't let him get that far." They climbed into the vehicle, dust kicking up behind the tires as the cruiser thundered down the road, headlights slicing through the darkness like two sharpened blades. The night wind slammed against the windows, carrying the scent of dry brush and something else, something older, heavier, almost metallic. The detective gripped the steering wheel harder. "He's running to where it happened," the detective said. "To where he took her. To where he thinks he can hide again." The sheriff stared ahead, jaw clenched. Or where he thinks he can finish something. The desert unrolled before them, vast and empty, but the detective knew better. It wasn't empty. It was full. Full of echoes. Full of memories. Full of secrets clawing their way back to the surface. The mine road appeared like a scar, carved through the land, uneven cracked asphalt, swallowed by sand and weeds. Old wooden signs leaned sideways, warning trespassers of unstable ground. Beyond them, the silhouettes of rusted mining equipment stood like skeletons against the night sky. And there, faint, shaky, but visible, a set of distant headlights bouncing across uneven terrain. "He's still ahead of us," the detective muttered. "Punch it." The cruiser jolted forward, tires grinding against the rocky path. The sheriff held the dashboard as the vehicle slammed over dips and rises. The distance between them and the fleeing headlights shrank, slowly, painfully, but steadily. Then the killer's car turned sharply off the road, twisting into a narrow path barely recognizable as a trail. "He knows this land," the sheriff warned. "So do I," the detective said. The killer's headlights vanished over a ridge, swallowed by a dip in the terrain. The detective killed their own headlights, instantly plunging both men into darkness. "Are you insane?" the sheriff hissed. "He'll spot us if we're lit up. Better to follow his dust." And there it was, barely visible but real. A shimmering line of dust drifting in the moonlight, like a ghostly trail pointing the way. They followed, slow, silent, careful. The path cut between two jagged rock formations that looked like jaws waiting to close. The cruiser squeezed through, scraping against stone every second, feeling like the desert was tightening around them. And then they saw it, the killer's vehicle parked crookedly near the mouth of an abandoned mine shaft. The detective's blood went cold. He went underground. The sheriff whispered, "He's using the same place." "The same place he brought her," the detective finished. They got out quietly, the night pressing against them like a blanket lined with fear. The mine entrance gaped open, a black void, a throat leading down into the earth. A faint flicker of light danced inside, a flashlight moving. "He knows we're coming," the detective murmured. The sheriff's voice shook. "We don't have backup yet. We go in. Are you out of your... We go in." The detective stepped forward before the sheriff could argue. The ground crunched beneath his boots, the sand giving way to old boards warped by time. The air from the shaft was cold damp, carrying a hint of rot and disuse. He could hear dripping water echoing somewhere deep inside. The killer's flashlight beam jittered further ahead, illuminating fragments of rusted rails and collapsed beams. The mine groaned like a living thing, as if resenting their intrusion. Step by step they descended. The flashlight beam ahead moved faster now, jerky, anxious. "He's not here to hide," the detective whispered. "He's here to destroy something." What, the sheriff asked. Evidence, memory, maybe even himself. The tunnel widened slightly, splitting into two passages. The detective scanned the ground, fresh footprints, deep, hurried, turning left. This way. As they moved deeper, the air thickened, the silence sharpening. The detective's breathing echoed faintly off the stone walls. The sheriff's flashlight cast long shadows that crawled along the ceiling like insects, and then voices. Not loud, but enough. A voice echoing ahead, strained, talking to itself, unraveling. The detective motioned the sheriff to kill his light. They stepped forward in darkness, guided only by the faint glow ahead. The killer's voice grew clearer, more frantic. "I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to. You shouldn't have come here. You shouldn't have followed me. I didn't want this." Each sentence cracked, splintered, echoing down the tunnel like shards of guilt. They reached a curve in the passage and peered around it. There he was, standing near the remnants of an old mining cart. A man in his late 50s, hair wild, clothes, dusty eyes, fevered with fear. A man who looked like he'd been running not just tonight, but for decades. In his hands he held a small metal box, old, rusted, locked with a broken latch. The detective knew instantly what it was. Evidence, something he had stashed away all those years ago. And now he was going to destroy it. The detective stepped into the light. "Put the box down." The man spun flashlight, shaking wildly in his grip. For a moment, his eyes looked like a cornered animal's. "You again," he whispered. "You people can't leave me alone. You never could." The detective kept moving forward, slow measured. The desert gave her back. "You should have run farther." The man's breathing sped up. He glanced at the box, then at the old minecart. "You don't understand. I tried to protect her. She didn't listen. She wanted to tell. She wanted to ruin everything." "Tell what?" the detective asked quietly. He shook his head frantically. "I was helping her. She trusted me. She always trusted me." "She trusted you," the detective echoed, "and you brought her here." "I didn't kill her!" he shouted, suddenly, voice cracking across the tunnel. The sheriff flinched at the force of it. "I didn't kill her. She fell. It was an accident." The detective's voice stayed calm, steady, cold. "So you buried her and ran." He closed his eyes, shaking. "I panicked. I made mistakes. But I didn't kill her." "What's in the box?" the detective asked. The man's eyes snapped open. "Nothing. Nothing you need to see. Nothing anyone needs to see." "It's hers, isn't it?" the detective pressed. "Something she left behind." The man's voice dropped to a whisper. "It's mine." He clutched the box tighter. And then the tunnel shook. A long, deep groan rolled through the earth as if the mine itself was warning them. Dust rained from the ceiling. A support beam cracked like breaking bone. "Move!" the sheriff shouted. "This shaft isn't stable." The killer turned and bolted deeper into the mine flashlight, bouncing wildly, disappearing into the maze. The detective sprinted after him. "Stop!" he yelled. "Stop, or the whole place will come down." But the man didn't stop. He ran faster, desperate, hunted. And then, just as the detective rounded a corner, the earth trembled again, stronger this time, and the ceiling above the killer gave way in an explosion of dust and rock. A roar filled the mine, and the man vanished in a collapse of stone and darkness. The detective shielded his face as debris slammed into the ground, blocking the passage ahead. Dust filled the air, choking thick, impossible to breathe. The sheriff grabbed him, pulling him back. "We have to get out. It's coming down." The detective coughed. Hard eyes burning, pulled toward the exit. Behind the wall of fallen rock, the killer's flashlight flickered dimly, then vanished completely. The detective stared at the cave-in chest, heaving. He wasn't sure if the man was dead, or trapped, or waiting. But one thing was certain. The box, the evidence, was now buried again, and the desert had just taken something back. The night outside the mine felt colder than it should have, as if the desert itself had inhaled sharply when the tunnel collapsed and hadn't exhaled since. The detective stumbled out into the open air, coughing dust, the sheriff dragging him the last few feet as the ground trembled behind them with the aftershocks of shifting earth. The mine groaned again, deep wounded, ancient, until the rumbling finally faded, leaving only the rasp of wind scraping through the rocks. The sheriff bent over, hands on his knees, lungs burning. "We can't go back in there." The detective wiped dust from his face, staring at the black mouth of the mine, now choked shut by stone. "He's not dead." The sheriff looked up, startled. "You don't know that." The detective narrowed his eyes. I know men like him. They survive like cockroaches. They hide where no one else can, and they always crawl back out. But even as he said it, a sliver of doubt pricked at him. The collapse had been brutal, merciless, tons of earth sealing off the deeper tunnels instantly. It was entirely possible the killer was crushed, buried, gone. Possible, but possible wasn't certain, and certain was the only thing that mattered. The sheriff holstered his flashlight with shaking hands. We call it in. We get a rescue team, engineers, someone who knows how to stabilize the shaft. The detective's voice cut like cold steel. No one goes down there until I say so. The sheriff blinked. What? You heard me. The detective's gaze remained locked on the collapsed entrance. He's had 30 years to run from what he did. I'm not giving him 1 inch of advantage now. If he's alive, he'll dig for air, find pockets, crawl into the deeper tunnels. And if he does, he'll come out somewhere else. Mines this old always have escape routes, vents, side shafts, forgotten passages. The sheriff looked unsettled. You think he planned this? The detective didn't answer directly. He knew this mine. He knew the layout. He knew every hiding place. If he ran in there, he had a reason. And the box? The sheriff asked quietly. The detective's jaw tightened, still buried again. The sheriff exhaled hard, head shaking. That box could hold the truth we've been chasing. It does, the detective replied. And he'd rather die than let us see it. Lightning flickered far in the distance. Silent, distant, like a warning, sneaking along the horizon. A storm was forming, not tonight, but soon. And storms in the desert didn't just bring rain. They brought erosion, collapses, shifts in the earth. If they didn't find the killer or the box before the storm arrived, both might be lost forever. The detective turned toward the sheriff. We need to find every exit this mine ever had. That could take days. We don't have days. They climbed back into the cruiser, dust still rising behind them as they tore down the mine road. The radio crackled, with deputies checking in, asking for status updates, requesting instructions. The sheriff answered with the bare minimum. The detective said nothing. His mind raced not randomly, but with purpose, locking pieces into place. The killer returned to the mine. The killer destroyed the tunnel behind him. The killer took the box with him, which meant one thing only. The box wasn't just evidence, it was leverage. The detective replayed the man's frantic words in the tunnel. You don't understand. She wanted to tell. She wanted to ruin everything. Ruin what? Expose what? What could a teenage girl possibly have known that would drive a grown man into a panic that lasted decades? The detective knew one truth better than anyone. Killers didn't live with guilt. They lived with fear. And this man had been afraid for 30 years. When they returned to the station, the building buzzed with tension. Phones ringing non-stop, deputies rushing between offices, updates flying in from the excavation team, from dispatch from nearby counties that had been alerted to watch for the killer. But the detective didn't slow down. He moved through the chaos like a knife through fog, straight to the board plastered with photos and evidence. He stared at the girl's face, the smile, the innocence, the eyes that didn't know the danger she was walking toward. Then the photo from the locket, the faded outline of the man beside her, his arm too close, his smile too familiar, his presence too comfortable. The sheriff joined him, shoulders sagging. We've alerted search and rescue. They'll assess the mine at first light. No, the detective snapped. We're moving now. In the dark, the sheriff protested. That terrain is a death trap. So was this case, the detective said, and we walked into that. Before the argument could escalate, a deputy hurried over with a folder. Sir, you might want to see this. We pulled old town maps. There's more than one way out of that mine. The detective grabbed the folder, flipping through faded blueprints, notes scribbled in pencil diagrams of shafts long abandoned, and there marked faintly in red a secondary exit. The sheriff leaned in. That's nearly 2 miles from the main entrance. Exactly. The detective traced the narrow passage with his finger. If he survived the collapse, he'll head this way. It leads toward the ridge. A deputy nearby paled. Ridge Road. That place is impossible to reach by vehicle. The detective looked up slowly. So he'll be on foot. The room fell silent. Every deputy stiffened. A killer on foot, in the desert, at night, heading toward isolation. The detective turned sharply. We split into teams. 2 units cover the lower trail, 2 cover the ridge. No one approaches the secondary exit until I give the order. The sheriff hesitated. And if he's armed? He's desperate, the detective said. That's worse. Teams mobilized quickly. Radios checked flashlights, tested off-road vehicles, fueled. The detective grabbed his gear and headed for the door. But before he could leave, someone spoke his name softly. It was her father, standing in the hallway. A hollowed man, a trembling man, a man who had aged a lifetime in mere hours. The detective stopped. The hallway felt too tight, too echoing. The father stepped closer, voice quivering. If he's alive, will you bring him back? The detective's gaze hardened. Yes. The father swallowed, eyes shining. Alive. However he comes, the detective answered. He comes back. A tear slid down the old man's cheek. He told me once. He said she fell. Said it was an accident. The detective's voice dropped to a cold whisper. Men who bury bodies don't bury accidents. The father nodded, shuddering. I was wrong to protect him. Yes, the detective said. You were. He walked past the man without looking back. The sheriff lingered for a brief moment, placing a hand on the father's shoulder before following the detective into the night. The teams reached the ridge trail in under half an hour, engines rumbling through the darkness. They parked near a cluster of dead juniper trees, their branches twisted like hands frozen in warning. The desert stretched out before them, lit only by weak moonlight and distant lightning flickering across the sky. The detective raised his flashlight, its beam slicing through the black. There, he whispered. Footprints, fresh, uneven, rushed, leading toward the ridge. He made it, the sheriff breathed. He always makes it, the detective replied. They followed the prints, the wind hissing past their ears like static. The ridge narrowed the path, forcing them single file along a precarious drop. Somewhere below, rocks tumbled in the distance, dislodged by something moving in the dark. Something alive. A deputy whispered, Do you hear that? Footsteps. Not theirs. Ahead. The detective raised his hand, signaling silence. Every heart held still, every breath quieted. Then, a faint beam of light. A flashlight, flickering weakly on the ridge. He's hurt, the sheriff whispered. The collapse injured him. Or the box is heavy, the detective said. They crept closer. The flashlight flickered again, then went out entirely. Silence swallowed the ridge. The detective stepped forward, scanning the darkness, and then a voice emerged. Weak, broken, but unmistakably human. You shouldn't have followed me. The detective froze. The sheriff reached for his weapon. The voice came again, strained, ragged. It wasn't supposed to happen that way. The detective stepped forward, flashlight trembling slightly as he raised it. The beam landed on a figure slumped against the rocks, dust-coated, bleeding. Barely conscious. The killer. But there was something in his hands. Not the flashlight. Not a weapon. The metal box, clutched tight against his chest. The detective approached, slow ready, every sense sharpened to a blade. The killer lifted his head, eyes, unfocused, voice hoarse. You don't know what was inside. The detective crouched low, staring at him without pity. Open it. The killer's fingers tightened around the box. Lightning flashed. And for a split second, the detective saw fear explode in the man's eyes. Not fear of death, not fear of justice, fear of the truth. The man whispered, It wasn't just me. The detective's blood went cold, and before he could speak, the killer's body went limp. But the box remained firmly in his grip, still locked, still hiding something the desert had not yet revealed, something someone else had kept hidden, something someone else would kill to protect. The killer's body slumped sideways, the metal box still locked in his grip, his breath shallow and fading, each inhale weaker than the one before. The desert wind swept across the ridge, carrying dust in thin streaks that curled around him like ghostly fingers trying to reclaim what they'd buried decades ago. The detective leaned closer, checking for a pulse. It was there, but faint, fluttering irregularly like a dying ember, refusing to go dark. He's going, the sheriff whispered behind him. Not yet, the detective replied. Because he couldn't. Because this man had carried the truth for 30 years, and that truth was finally bleeding through the cracks. Because the last words he spoke, it wasn't just me, still hung in the air, twisting everything the detective thought he knew about this case. The sheriff kneeled beside him, flashlight trembling in his hand. We need medics. The detective shook his head, slowly. If we call medics, we lose time. And whoever he's talking about, they're still out there. The sheriff's breath hitched. Another person helping him. The detective didn't look away from the killer, or someone worse. Lightning flickered across the sky, again brighter this time, edges of the storm creeping closer. Swallowing stars. The temperature dropped sharply, a cold front sweeping in across the ridge. The desert wasn't just restless, now it was impatient. The killer groaned softly, a sound ripped from somewhere deep in his chest. His eyelids twitched. His fingers tightened instinctively around the box, as if even unconscious he refused to let it go. "Open it," the sheriff said. The detective extended his hand toward the box, but the killer's grip tightened reflexively, almost violently. Even weakened, injured, on the edge of death, he fought to protect it. "He's scared of what's inside," the sheriff murmured. "No," the detective said quietly. "He's scared of who's inside." The sheriff frowned. Inside. Not literally. Inside the truth. Inside the story. Inside whatever she knew. The detective pried the man's fingers back one by one, methodical, firm, ignoring the unconscious resistance. The metal box was old, rusted at the corners, hinges bent, latch corroded but still functional. It had survived storms, collapses, years underground. It would survive this moment. The sheriff shined his light over it. The lock's jammed. The detective nodded. "Then we break it." He gripped the lid, braced the bottom with his knee, and pulled hard. The metal groaned in protest. A hinge snapped. A sliver of the lid bent upward, but not enough to open it. The killer stirred again, forcing out a whisper that barely existed. "Don't open it out here." The detective froze. Why not? The man's breathing hitched sharply. His pupils fluttered open for a moment, dilated, wild, filled with a terror that didn't belong to someone already facing death. They're watching. A chill slid up the detective's spine, not from fear, from understanding. This wasn't about a single killer. This was about a secret someone else had kept alive. Someone who had eyes on the case even now. Someone who might have been waiting for the box to surface. "Who's watching?" The detective demanded, voice low, sharp. The killer's lips moved, but no sound came. His head drooped. His body sagged. The sheriff reached forward instinctively to steady him, but the detective lifted a hand. "Don't," he said quietly. "Let him talk if he can." But the killer didn't talk. His eyes rolled back. His breathing slowed. The detective felt for a pulse again. Still there, but fading fast. "We need to get him off this ridge," the sheriff urged. "Now!" "No," the detective said. "We need to get the box off this ridge." He stood gripping the box under his arm, the weight of it colder than the air around them. The metal seemed to hum faintly, as if the truth inside it gave off its own energy. "Put out a bolo," the detective said. "Not just for the killer, for anyone connected to him, anyone he knew in '95, anyone who visited the family, anyone who left town around the same time he did." The sheriff blinked. "That's half the county." "Then we start with the other half," the detective replied. As they lifted the killer onto a stretcher brought by deputies, the detective felt eyes on him. Not literal eyes. No glint in the darkness, no figure watching from the rocks, but something in the air felt wrong, watched, observed. As if the desert itself wasn't the only thing waiting for the truth. Back at the station, chaos had erupted. Phones rang nonstop. Deputies moved with frantic purpose. The storm on the horizon had grown, thunder rolling closer, each boom, shaking windows like a distant drumbeat signaling something coming, something no one was prepared for. The detective placed the metal box on the evidence table under the brightest lamp they had. Deputies gathered around, but kept their distance as if the box might explode. The sheriff exhaled. "We need tools." The detective nodded. "Get a rotary cutter, gloves, goggles, full containment." As they prepared, the detective replayed every clue from the last few days. The locket, the scrap of clothing, the watch, the keys, the scrap of paper, the father's lies, the sister's fear, the killer's words. It wasn't just me. Just one thread kept pulling tighter. Someone else had been there in 1995. Someone else had a stake in keeping the case buried. Someone else wasn't finished. The sheriff returned with the cutter and safety gear. A deputy placed sandbags around the table to contain debris, though it felt unnecessary. Still, everyone moved like they were prepping for a bomb disposal. "Ready?" the sheriff asked. The detective nodded. "Do it." The cutter screamed to life, sparks flying as it bit into the metal. The room filled with the harsh metallic smell of heated steel. Deputies flinched as shards pinged off the sandbags, tiny sparks dying on the floor. Then finally, the lid snapped. A dull clang echoed in the room. The sheriff killed the cutter. Silence settled thickly around them. The detective reached forward and slowly lifted the lid. Inside, a stack of photographs, a cassette tape, a folded piece of paper stained and brittle, and something else, a silver bracelet. The detective's blood turned to ice. He knew that bracelet. He'd seen it in pictures. It belonged to the girl. The sheriff sucked in a breath. Holy! The detective lifted the bracelet gently, the metal cool against his glove. A small charm dangled from it, a camera charm. She loved photography. She wore it everywhere, except the night she disappeared. Her mother never understood why she didn't have it on. Now they knew. He took it off her. His throat tightened. But then he saw the photographs. He saw what they showed. People, not the girl. Other people, adults. Some familiar, some unmistakable. The detective's heart kicked hard in his chest. Sheriff, he whispered, look. The sheriff leaned in and his face went pale. These were taken before she died, the detective said. She saw something. She photographed something she shouldn't have. The sheriff swallowed. This isn't about a man obsessed with a girl. No, the detective said darkly. This is bigger. He pulled another photograph from the box. Then another. Then another. Faces. Meetings. Exchanges. Records of something hidden. Something dangerous. The sheriff whispered, this is a conspiracy. The detective nodded slowly. And he wasn't the only one involved. Lightning cracked outside, shaking the glass walls of the station. And for the first time, the detective understood. This wasn't a cold case anymore. This was a war. And someone powerful enough to bury the truth for 30 years, was going to come looking for the box. They wouldn't just let these photographs resurface. Someone would do anything to silence them. To silence him. To silence the entire investigation. The detective lifted the cassette tape from the box. On the label faded, but still legible. Tape 1, if something happens to me. The detective stared at it, heart hammering. The girl recorded this. She knew she was in danger. She left a message. And now, nearly 30 years later, he was finally going to hear her voice. The cassette tape sat in the detective's palm like a pulse, small, fragile, but thrumming with the weight of years. Around him, the station buzzed with frantic energy deputies, barking updates, printers spitting out reports, radios crackling under the pressure of the storm, rolling closer. But he didn't hear any of it. Not really. Every sound blurred into white noise, fading beneath the gravity of the tape in his hand. Tape 1, if something happens to me. Her handwriting. Her fear captured in ink. Her last attempt to leave a trail. Get me a player, the detective said, voice steady but tight. Now. A deputy sprinted across the room, rummaged through an old evidence cabinet, and returned with a dusty cassette recorder, one of the few relics from the 90s the department hadn't thrown out. The detective snapped open the battery compartment, shoved in a fresh set, and placed the tape gently inside, as if afraid the slightest pressure might erase her voice forever. The sheriff stood at his shoulder, silent, rigid tension radiating off him like heat. You ready? The sheriff asked. No, the detective answered honestly. But we're out of time. He pressed play. For a long moment, nothing. Just static, faint, irregular popping softly, like distant fireworks. Deputies gathered around the table, breath-held eyes fixed on the recorder. Then, slowly, shakily, a voice bled through the noise. A girl's voice. Young, nervous, brave. Okay, I don't know how to start this. The sheriff closed his eyes. The detective's grip tightened on the table. Her voice wavered words, trembling on the edge of panic. If you're hearing this, something went wrong. Something I thought I could handle, but maybe I can't. The static swelled for a heartbeat, then cleared again. I didn't want to scare anyone. I didn't want to get anyone in trouble. But I think someone is watching me. I think someone knows what I found. A deputy flinched. Another whispered God. The detective leaned closer. What did you find? He murmured under his breath. On the tape, the girl inhaled shakily. I took pictures. I didn't mean to. I was testing my camera near the old yard behind the diner. I thought it was empty, but people were there, talking, yelling, and I took photos before I realized what was happening. A deputy grabbed one of the printed photos from the evidence table, the ones found in the box. Faces, meetings, exchanges, shadows of something illegal, something organized, something dangerous. The girl's voice continued trembling. I think they saw me. I think someone followed me home. I didn't tell my mom. I didn't tell my dad. I didn't want them to worry. But then he came to my window. The sheriff stiffened. She didn't say the killer's name, not at first. I didn't know who else to trust, she whispered. So I talked to him. He said he cared about me, that he wanted to protect me, that he knew what I saw was dangerous. He said he'd help me figure out what to do. The detective felt the room shift, an emotional crack, splitting the space. She trusted him. She told him. She confided in the very man who would take her into the desert. But now, she said, voice dropping, scared now, in a way that cut through the static like a blade. Now I think he's lying. Now I think he's scared too. And when I asked him what I should do with the pictures, he told me to destroy them. She exhaled sharply, breath shaking. But I didn't. I hid them. And I'm making this tape because I think he's working with them. Every deputy in the room went rigid. The sheriff cursed under his breath. The detective felt the puzzle shifting again, no longer a lone predator, but a network, a web, a nest of secrets hidden under the town's quiet surface. Her voice cracked. He's not the only one. Someone else is involved, someone important, someone people listen to. Static swallowed her words for several seconds. The detective clenched his fists. When her voice returned, it was softer, whispering, terrified. He told me to meet him tonight, at the old mine road. He said he knew a place where we could talk, but I don't think he wants to talk. I think he wants the pictures. Another pause, a thick one. I'm taking the bracelet off now, so if someone finds me, they know something's wrong, and I'm putting the tape in the box. If I don't come home by morning, please listen to this. Her final breath stuttered. Please don't let him lie about what happened to me. The recording clicked abruptly, stopped. Silence fell across the room, a deep, raw silence filled with grief rage and a truth that hit harder than any blow. A deputy wiped her eyes. Another stared at the floor, jaw trembling. The sheriff leaned heavily on the table as if the girl's words had knocked the air out of him. But the detective stood frozen, every muscle locked as if the tape had welded him into place. The sheriff finally whispered, Jesus, she knew everything. No, the detective said softly. She knew part of it. He stared at the pile of photographs, the meetings, the faces, the evidence of something that had been festering in the town like a rot. Then he stared at the killer's words echoing in his mind. It wasn't just me. The detective's voice lowered to a grim whisper. She didn't understand how deep it went. She didn't know who else was involved. The sheriff looked up confused. Who else? Someone at the diner. Someone from the yard. Those guys left town years ago. The detective shook his head slowly. Not them. He picked up a photo from the table, a blurred shot of a man standing near a truck at dusk, half hidden in shadow. The girl might have captured it by accident, but not by coincidence. He held it up to the sheriff. Recognize him. The sheriff squinted, then went pale. That's no, that can't be. It is, the detective said. But he left. He wouldn't. The sheriff's protests died in his throat, because the truth was right there, captured in grainy, accidental evidence. A man respected, a man trusted, a man who had pushed the investigation away in 1995, a man who had defended the killer, a man who had kept secrets for decades. The sheriff whispered the words like a confession. Her father. The room spun. Deputies gasped. One cursed under their breath. The detective set the photo down like a verdict. He wasn't covering for the killer, he said. He was covering for himself. The sheriff shook his head violently. We don't know that. It could have been. Look at the tape, the detective snapped. She knew he was working with someone important, someone people listened to. The sheriff's voice cracked, desperate. He loved her. He loved himself more, the detective said coldly. The storm outside cracked thunder like a whip across the sky. The detective grabbed the tape recorder again. Something happens at the end, he said. The static. Did you hear it? It wasn't random. It cut off too fast. Someone might have been in the room with her, someone who didn't want the rest recorded. The sheriff swallowed. You think? Yes, the detective said. I think he found her making the tape. The storm hit the station windows with a metallic rattle. The detective stepped back from the table, mind racing, connecting dots no one wanted to acknowledge. She told him about the pictures, she told him about the meeting, she told him everything. And when she went missing, he pushed us away from the truth. The sheriff whispered, but the killer, he took her to the mine. Yes, the detective said relentlessly, because her father sent her to him. The sheriff looked horrified, to clean up the mess. And the killer panicked, the detective added. Things didn't go as planned. He wasn't supposed to bury her. He wasn't supposed to kill her. They were supposed to scare her. intimidate her, get the photos back. The truth detonated in the detective's mind. It was a cover-up gone wrong. He stared at the photograph of the father, at the photo from the locket, at the bracelet, at the broken watch, at the girl's voice trapped in magnetic tape. Then he turned to the sheriff. "We need to bring him in." The sheriff's voice barely rose, but he's old, he's fragile. The detective's eyes hardened. He wasn't fragile 30 years ago. Lightning flashed again, brighter than before, illuminating the corridor like the world had cracked open. A deputy burst into the room. "Sir," she gasped, "you need to see this." The detective stepped forward. "What is it?" She held out her phone, showing a video feed from the patrol car stationed at the father's house. The porch light, the empty yard, the open door, the overturned chair, and blood-fresh drops leading into the darkness. The father was gone. Taken, or running, or meeting someone. The detective whispered voice, deadly quiet. "He knows we opened the box." The storm roared outside. The hunt had just changed. And now, someone far more dangerous than the killer was out there. Still alive, still hiding, still watching.